Hi, hey, hello. How are you? In this part 2 on the mysterious disappearance of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, we're going to be going through the main theories circulating online on the case and discussing the questions still in the air. So let's get right into the questions still floating surrounding the case, shall we? Oh, and you might want to see part 1 first if you aren't familiar with the case already. But if you're all caught up, then let's go. About the unusual phone and camera usage. Why not try to call emergency numbers or other numbers more often? When you're in distress or in panic mode, one would think you'd try and try again. The pattern of trying at the same times each day, twice a day, is a bit peculiar. Even if we account for them trying to save battery, because unless they managed to find their way out of the jungle somehow, chances are that they were never going to get better service than they had at the beginning. Why not send texts, record voice messages, take photos or film to document their experience? Also, they didn't have a battery issue with the camera, only with the phones. They could have used it, but they didn't really. Why wait 8 days to take 80 photos at night in the dark? After days went by, Chris's phone was turned on a number of times, but the wrong PIN code was entered. Or no PIN code was entered. If Lisanne was the one operating the phone, why not call emergency services without entering the PIN, so use the phone in its emergency function, essentially? How come the camera and phones within a backpack which was in water and under torrential rains for months were still able to provide data? Where is photo number 509 and how can it have been deleted on a computer? Why the discrepancy between the time on the electronic equipment like phones and cameras and the timeline that all of the witnesses have given? Literally all of them. About the bones and other mysterious deaths. Why were so few skeletal remains found for both the girls? Why were they found on the same sandbank? And what would be the odds of that happening? None, according to a criminologist interviewed at the time. Why did no one seem surprised that they were found amongst other people's skeletal remains? Many tourists have gone missing or turned up dead in the area, Italians, English, Americans, but also local people, mostly women and children, and unfortunately the locals are seldom investigated. In fact, only the cases covered by the media are investigated and the government is very protective of tourism in the area. It yields a lot of money. Why were there no scavenger marks on the bones that were found? No marks at all, in fact, no scratches from the river and the rocks, nothing. Why were there traces of phosphorus on Chris's bones? Why were they abnormally bleached? Did someone use lime or lye to accelerate the decomposition of the bodies? Nothing was found on Lisanne's bones, however. Why was Lisanne's rolled up leg skin found intact, merely decomposed like 5 months later? For that, it would have had to have been kept in a cold, dark place, not in the jungle, according to forensic specialists. What about the backpack, turning up almost intact with all of the electronics inside still working? Almost like magic. The rivers there were not flooding at the time. Local environmentalists don't buy the sudden appearance of the backpack nor the fact that the girls were washed away by the river. And the key to their host's place. Shouldn't it have been in the backpack? Why wasn't it found in there? Anywho, let's get into the different scenarios here, all of which I have come across online. In part 1, we already covered the lost in the jungle scenario, which raises all of the questions we just talked about. So then there's the wildcat attack. Jaguars seem to be the only wild predator that is known to inhabit this area, and some suggested that they might have been attacked. However, the last record of an attack on humans in the area dates back to over 20 years ago. The guides seem to have never seen any around either. So although it may be possible, even if it was, there would have been marks on the bones that were recovered, which there weren't any. Then there's the scenario where they would have been attacked and cannibalized by indios conejo, aka indigenous people living in the forests that were said to practice anthropophagy. Although these legends were told to the indigenous people living in the area, it would seem that the conejo people are just that, a myth. So, highly unlikely. Then there's the theory of organ trafficking, because a young 18-year-old woman was found a few years prior in the area of Boquete, Chiriquí, dead and missing all of her vital organs, and because this case was linked to organ trafficking, this scenario was brought up. But given the location where the bones were found, if they weren't just planted there in the first place, it seems unlikely that this would be the case, as it would be most impractical to operate in the jungle. But once again, we don't know if they stayed in the jungle the whole time. Then there's the theory of a serial killer roaming. 2 serial killers were said to be in the area, or of the area, which explains why they would come up as a potential scenario. Something I forgot to mention in part 1, there was also a statement made by a German tourist who claims to have heard a female voice screaming for help, followed by a loud bang, then 2 men hiding in the bushes, after which he ran away in fear. This was on the Quetzal Trail, west of the Pianista Trail, on April 5th. The next one is the opportunistic attack. Someone or a group of ill-intentioned people would have attacked them or captured them to assault them, which resulted in their deaths. This is the theory that I encountered the most online. It seems to be the most likely one, besides the potential lost in the jungle one, where they cross paths with most likely men who attack them and take them to another place where they are held captive for days until they are eventually killed. Some people on the internet went as far as to cover day by day, hour by hour, what could have happened to the girls in that scenario. They specify having been tipped off by an anonymous person who wishes to remain anonymous, but who came forward and told what she knew to the police, who, although they mentioned her in passing in an interview, did nothing with her deposition. So, according to this source, who was close at the time with one of the boys allegedly involved, the girls would have gone back down early after the Pianista hike, and they would have come across a car. Inside were 4 young guys from a gang in the area. Unable to catch a ride back into town, they would have gone into the car. One of these guys, by the way, would allegedly have been related to the guide mentioned many times previously in the story, and all of them would have been, once again, allegedly involved in illegal activities. Anywho, they would have invited them to go swimming with them at the hot springs, Caldera Springs, and there's a photo circulating on the internet of people swimming from afar, and it's speculated that these 2 heads right here could be that of the girls. I'm not going to get into the details of this specific scenario, but allegedly at the moment of leaving the springs, they would have been forcefully taken to an abandoned cabin of sorts, kept captives there for a few days, and been able to use their phones on the occasions where their kidnappers were busy doing something else. Maybe the kidnappers were too stupid or distracted or even under the influence of drugs or alcohol, who knows, to take their phones away. Maybe they didn't even think to look for phones until they found them after April 3rd's last attempts by the girls at reaching emergency services. Then they would have taken them from then on. But that's just me speculating. The specific scenario that I'm referring to alluded to trafficking and then organ trafficking as the ultimate motive, and SA as a byproduct of sorts. Yeah. They would have then been moved near the cave of La Pandura and kept there for a while before ultimately getting killed. By the way, that's where a plastic bag filled with junk food wrappers and the sole of a pinkish purple shoe were found. Same color as the inside of Lisanne's shoes. The scenario implies that this was an organized abduction. It also implies that one of them was operated on for her lungs, and it most certainly didn't happen in the jungle, if it even did happen. So first we have to believe the kidnappers' stupidity regarding the phones, which could be believable if they were these careless young guys, but then the same careless people turn into jungle surgeons later on? I don't know about that. The person behind this theory claims that all of their information comes from this anonymous witness. Could be true, could be false, but the most credible part of their theory, in my opinion, are the points made regarding the photos. Since the photos were handled by the Panamanian authorities, they suggest that they erased photo 509 because it didn't support the lost in the jungle theory, as according to them, it showed the girls at the hot springs after the hike or something like that. And not only that, but that they rearranged the order of the photos to make it seem as though they never came back down. We could imagine that if, for instance, we were to ignore the EXIF data and imagine that one of the girls, Lisanne, for instance, had the backpack on the way up and then Kris on the way down. This would also kind of explain the difference in the skies at the summit, because they would have then been at the summit twice. Another interesting point they made was that they were witnessed going into a vehicle after their hike and by their taxi driver, no less, which is odd because they supposedly couldn't catch a ride, which is why they would have got into the car in the first place. But okay. The driver, by the way, is found dead, drowned in a small body of water almost a year later. The theory also offers a reason for the guide to have spent over 30 minutes in the girls' room, and that is getting rid of the clothes and shoes and any traces of the hike to make it seem as though they hadn't returned. Okay, so the guide would be in on it, covering up, and coincidentally have had the same idea for a narrative as the authorities. Okay, convenient, but why not? I mean, it's the low-hanging fruit, I guess. He would have had to put their bathing suits back in their room because I could see them folded up with those other clothes on this picture. I hope I can find the picture again. Unless they had more than one bathing suit, of course. But who knows? Another thing is that he was allegedly accompanied by the German girl, or was she Dutch actually? Eileen, I think, working for the Spanish school. That is unclear because different sources say different things, but it seems as though he wasn't alone either way. I don't know anymore. According to the same source, the Dutch girl accompanying the guide would have promptly left Panama soon after to return home to the Netherlands. So that's a lot of convenient, quote-unquote, convenient things happening here, which make it impossible to verify anything. But okay. Another version of this attacked and kidnapped scenario that had been brought forward could be them crossing paths with the guide himself, and maybe someone working for him, or even his relative, and somehow ending up in his farm where they unfortunately were killed. He has previously offered a tour for free to tourists, especially pretty women who had declined his tours, so maybe he have forced the girls to follow him there, and at one point or another, lime, also used to help matters decompose in the plantations amongst other farms, would have been used to help the remains decompose faster. The guide would allegedly then have planted the items and the remains that were recovered to help his narrative and try to convince everyone to stop the searches. He and his team were the ones that found practically everything: foot, shoe, bones, I think that the local people who found the backpack were also working for him. I read somewhere, maybe not, I'm not sure. But yeah. By the way, Lisanne's foot and shoe were found in a location where decomposition would typically be very slow because of the altitude and temperature. This other missing person, for instance, was found in the same environment, almost intact, practically a year after having passed away. So if they had died naturally, not only should we have found more remains, but also they should have been less dismantled. Once again, it's only a theory, but keep in mind that his coffee farm is around that area where everything was found. He was at the root of every finding. I noted in watching one of his interviews that he seemed disappointed that the reward of at the end it was like $40,000 was not given to the people that handed the backpack and the bones. And everyone that I think found something was somehow working for him or with him. So was he doing this for the reward or what? What's the deal here? I don't know. He also contradicted himself many times in interviews and depositions. Kind of shady. And this theory, but it's not a theory per se, that I gotta touch on. It's this couple was hiking the trail of the Pianista in 2020, and they encountered a man living near the trail with whom they had coffee at his place. While filming a scene on his porch, they also inadvertently catch a glimpse at a wooden box behind him, where a piece of cloth is suspiciously white with red stripes, like Kris's shirt. I don't know why one would keep it if it was in fact her shirt, even if one of his dogs had found it in the jungle and brought it back, since this man happens to have been one of the last people to have seen the girls alive on their hike, and seeing as how he was interviewed at the time about their disappearance, you'd think that if his dogs had brought home a shirt, he would have turned it into the police. I mean, maybe he doesn't remember what they were wearing. Maybe it wasn't made public what clothes they were wearing that day to the people who don't have the internet, and in the jungle and in his position, I don't think he does. But of course, it could also have another darker explanation. Maybe it isn't the shirt, although it looks a freaking lot like the shirt, and it's a lot to say that this is just a coincidence that he happens to have had a rag with the exact pattern and color of Kris's shirt. Obviously dirty after 6 years, but he lives in the jungle and near the trail where they went missing, so no Zara stores anywhere around. How the... What? Seriously though. It seems wild to me. Editing me here, I thought I had it almost all covered. I thought I was practically done with this video when I came across something else altogether, and this other version of the events that may have happened. How was nothing investigated after this came to light? I believe that the cops have been informed of these testimonies and that nothing was made about it. It would take maybe a day's worth of investigation to verify the information that was offered here. So there's this investigator. He's been working on the case for years, and so he's had the time to talk to people. And one of these witnesses testified, and it was recorded, that Kris and Lisanne tried to buy some cannabis from someone in Boquete, and they spoke to a young man. This young man got them into contact with this group of guys, the gang. So in that afternoon of March 31st, they were spotted in the town square inside a red pickup truck in the company of 4 guys of this gang. They were in the middle of the back seat, surrounded by 2 guys, and then there were 2 other guys at the front. They were drinking beers and smoking what appeared to be cigarettes. Anyways, then they were spotted by other people going to or at the house party of one of the guys in the truck in Palo Alto, and at this point, I don't know if they did or did not buy the cannabis from them, but, remember that in the Netherlands, cannabis is legal and it is easy to buy just about anywhere. And Lisanne, on these first few days in Boquete, was feeling very stressed out and anxious. So maybe there's some truth to that. They've been spotted at this house party by different people, not just one person. However, it's this young guy, the one that saw them in the pickup truck, that was threatened by the gang. He started acting very paranoid. Well, I wouldn't say paranoid because it was justified, but he started acting very anxious, and his mother picked up on that. His behavior was different, and he told her that he was in trouble with the gang and that they had threatened to kill him because he had seen and he knew about the Dutch girls. On the 4th of April, he was killed, and the circumstances in which he was killed were very suspicious, to say the least. He went swimming with his family, and his family says he excused himself to go and pee at about 6 p.m. and then never came back. They found him the next day. He was in rigor mortis, so he had died a while back already. Some reports say that he was inside the river, like 5 meters deep inside the river. Others say that he was found on the side of the river. Some say that he had water in his lungs, which means that he was still alive when he was dropped in the river or fell in the river. Others say he had no water in his lungs, so he was already dead. Either way, he had taken a blow to the back of his head, and his death was at first labeled a drowning, and then it was changed to homicide. So that's that on this young man. Poor guy. He was only 22, I believe. He is said to have really wanted to be part of this gang, but in this version of events, at least, he was not part of it. I mean, he was allegedly pictured in that swimming photo next to the girls, or maybe somebody else was wearing a hat similar to his. Maybe it wasn't him. I don't see how he could have been there with the girls, whereas, he was killed because he saw these guys with the girls. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. It's either one or the other. It can't be both unless they used him, to try to pin it on him or something. But then why would they kill him? I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. But in this version of events, he was not part of the gang, and he saw them. And then 4 days later, he was dead. So his family was obviously distraught. And to add insult to injury, the gang disrupted this young man's funeral, or the ceremony at least, that was happening at the family house. They allegedly would have thrown rocks at the house. It was like in the newspapers and stuff. So the family was threatened as well. It certainly feels as though, it must have been great living in Boquete at this time. Seems like this gang, and there were many gangs, by the way, at the time. How can there be like 28 gangs in this small town? Like, I don't know, like I saw this figure somewhere. I don't know if it's real or not, but what the fuck? What are the authorities even there for? They seem pretty useless. I'm getting heated up. Usually I use a script. It helps me stay on topic and not go all over the place, not get emotional, not start screaming into the mic. But this, as you know, was not planned, so I didn't script it. I'm gonna try to chill out now. Almost a year go by, and one of the guys of the gang starts feeling remorseful. Once again, all of this is alleged. Nothing has been verified, so just keep that in mind. So this guy has been feeling remorse for a while now, and he can't sleep anymore. And so he bumps into person A, and he confesses to everything. He confesses to having been there when the young guy was killed. He confesses to having been there also when the Dutch girls were killed, and he's going to tell the whole story, basically. He was not only there, but he participated, of course. That's why he also feels remorse. But, some people don't, psychopaths. But apparently he wasn't, and he was feeling remorse. So he spilled the beans on everything to this person A, who was then very brave enough to go and talk to the private investigator that was working on Kris and Lisanne's case. And bear in mind that this person A, had stuff to lose. They had been threatened directly and indirectly by the gang as well, and they were at risk. I mean, it's not like the private investigator was going to guarantee their safety. It's not like the police was going to do anything. They hadn't done anything up until then, so what were they going to do? So this person was brave enough to still go and talk to the private investigator. They had tried to convince the guy that was remorseful to go to the cops with the information, and allegedly he had finally in the end agreed, but on that very night he just happened to have gotten killed as well. He was run over by a car multiple times. However, person A was able to talk to the private investigator about it. So they confirmed that the young man had been killed because he had seen the Dutch girls in the car and was potentially able to link the gang to their disappearance. They said that the red pickup truck that had been seen by multiple witnesses around the start of the Pianista Trail on the day that the girls went missing was indeed that of one of the gang members, and that the guys of the gang followed the girls and asked the taxi driver that dropped the girls off at the start of the Pianista Trail where he had dropped them off when he was on his way back from dropping them off. And of course, like in fear, he told them that he had dropped them off at the Pianista Trail, and they went over there and followed the girls on the trail. Apparently, they would have met up with the girls, and the girls were surprised to see them there because they hadn't planned to meet up with them. And they were a little bit afraid as well, but the guys convinced them that they were gonna take them to the Piedra de Lino trail by a shortcut in the jungle. They managed to convince them to follow them. And so together they took a trail that was not a main trail of the Pianista. It was a side trail that was actually going towards Palo Alto. It's called, I think, the Pata de Macho Trail, and the trail is barely ever used. Was it searched by the search teams during, the rescue operation for Kris and Lisanne? Well, apparently not. Or it was mentioned that it was kind of searched in the reports, but according to sources that were there, it was not searched. Interestingly, Guide F would have allegedly threatened the landowner to close down or to have closed down the path after the facts. So he would have, at the time, already steered the people and the search teams away from the path, and later on made sure that it was closed and nobody had access to it. But we'll circle back to that later on. So the group walks on, and after some time, they arrive at the house of the dude that had the house party the night before in Palo Alto. And so they get in and they start having alcohol and smoking and having this sort of a small get-together / party type of thing. And the guys start getting drunk. Maybe the girls too, I don't know. But the guys, they're getting drunk. And at least one of them has a reputation for sometimes getting violent and angry and out of control when he gets drunk. At least one of them, maybe two, I don't know. And that same dude, the one that has this reputation, also has a reputation for being troubled and for abusing animals sometimes, like dogs, and being very violent and aggressive towards animals, or having been in the past, just to put things into their context. So they're getting drunk there, and this guy, the particular one that has this reputation, starts getting touchy with Kris, and she's not into it. She's not having it. And so she pushes him back and struggles to get him off of her, and at some point hits him, and he gets into this rage because he got hit by a girl in front of his posse. So he gets into this uncontrollable rage and knocks her out, and then when she's on the floor, he beats her up, basically. I'm not gonna get into too much detail on that because it's disgusting, but Lisanne, seeing this, not only she starts screaming, obviously, but she also jumps over Kris, maybe to protect her, and she gets the same treatment from them. And once again, I'm not gonna get into the detail of the state that they left them in, which is despicable, but that's how they met their end. To add insult to injury, after they had passed, these disgusting pigs abused them, and all of them. And after that was done, they basically had to get rid of the bodies. So before they placed them into plastic bags and buried them under or around a mango tree on the guy's property, they took time to pick out strategic parts to dump in the wilderness and throw off the search teams and authorities and everyone searching for the girls, and trick them into thinking that they had in fact had an accident in the jungle and gotten lost. Allegedly, they would have used kerosene on the bones that were bleached to make them decompose faster. And the forensic experts that were asked by this private investigator if the kerosene would have worked as well as the lime to help decompose the bodies said that in fact it would have worked even better. They didn't even clean up the house themselves. They had somebody that worked for this guy whose house it was come over and clean up the mess for them. And they faked the photos. They staged the night photos as well. They faked the phone calls because on this guy's property there is no reception, no service. So yeah, they would have faked everything basically. Probably with the help of Guide F, who steered the search teams in the wrong directions, who was the one with his people to find the things that they had planted, and who helped, bury their tracks by closing the path or having it closed, who also allegedly threatened a lot of people into shutting up and not speaking of what they had seen or heard. All of this is alleged, and it's a testimony that was made by this person who heard it from one of the guys himself, allegedly. So we can treat it as another speculation, if you will. I, however, think that it's the one that makes the most sense. It also goes with what we've heard from various different witnesses about the truck, about the sightings of the girls. Let's not forget the deaths of the first young man, the death of the second young man, and then just a month after that, or before that, I don't know, in March 2015, Kris and Lisanne's taxi driver was also found dead in a shallow body of water in very suspicious circumstances. So who knows what that was about? Maybe he was about to talk as well. I don't know. But all of these things may now be explained. The only thing that makes no sense is the swimming photo. Because when would they have gone swimming, and why would the young guy that was killed be in the photo with them on the afternoon when he saw them in the truck with the other guys? I don't know. Why would the girls not have spoken to anyone about their swimming outing? I know that they did go and get a massage on Monday night. If they did go to the party, they went to the massage before they went to the party, and that doesn't come in conflict with it. The only thing is the photo. Maybe it's not even them on the photo. Maybe it's somebody else. The photo quality is so bad that we really can't tell who's on that photo. Well, I can't. I mean, it looks as though it may be them, but I'm not necessarily convinced as much as I am by this storyline. And when I think that all it would take for the cops is to go on that guy's property and start digging around that mango tree to see if they find anything, give a definite answer to what happened to these girls, and that they're not even doing that, it makes me so angry. But by now they could have moved everything anyway. I mean, if it's been years since this has been quote-unquote known, then what's to stop them from moving the remains from one place to another to make sure that nobody finds them out? If this is all true, these guys should definitely be rotting in jail. Instead, they're there terrorizing the people. What's to say they're not going to do it again? You know what I mean? They must be feeling almighty and untouchable. Well, I don't think it's a good thing for Panama to have just tried to hush things up or being as inefficient as they've been, or at least it seems, because now this is not going to make people want to go there. Finding the culprit and putting him behind bars would have. There's bad people everywhere. Everybody knows it. If you catch them and put them behind bars, then people are going to keep coming. If you just let them go free and bury your head in the sand, who's going to come? I'm surely not coming. It's really sad for these girls. I hope it does find a resolution in years to come. I hope that the families can find real closure if that is not already the case. If it isn't the case and they're still wondering, then I hope they really find the answers. Like and subscribe if you found the video interesting. Anyways, I will see you in the next one. Have a good day. Bye.